Salute and salutations, gang. It's Ghetto. We back. I'm not gonna belabor the point. You know we here for that part tres. Número tres. Número tres. Número tres. Okay. The curious case of the D.N.C. and the PPP. Oh, I said the PPP. D.N.C. and the double P, also known as Planned Parenthood. Let's get into it, man. Looking at them hanging out by the Democratic National Convention, spreading all sorts of interesting help there, if you will, and a longer view of the history of both of these organizations and their interplay for a very long time. As always, gang, y'all know how to get in touch. I know how to support the movement. We thank the Most High for all the blessings. I am so thankful to the Most High for all the blessings coming to you and your family. And so thankful to all the blessings the Most High continues to bestow on my family and myself. With all that being said, gang, this is Ghetto. Let's get into it. Yeah.
Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
So, saying what the fuck? Take a deep breath, man. I mean, take a long, deep breath. Know that if you call a shot, we at war. We at war. I'm there like I've always been. Think about turf, man. It ain't like it was.
I mean, you ain't gotta pay no price of buying no corners.
Since when do we buy corners? We take corners.
Man, you gonna buy one way or another.
Whether it's with the bodies we done lost,
or you're gonna lose. Time in the joint is behind us or ahead of us. I mean, you gonna get some shit in this game, but ain't shit for free. I mean, how many corners do we need? How much money can a nigga make?
More than a nigga can spend.
And then we ain't gonna be around to spend what we done made already.
Shit, I didn't think I was gonna be around this long.
Yeah. Well, we here now. The fact is, we got every mob in town, east side, west side, ready to pull together. Share territory on that good shit that Pop Joe putting out there. We take that shit downtown and we get in a money game that niggas ain't going to jail. I mean, we passed that run and gun shit, man. Like, we finance a package and we ain't got to see nothing but bank.
where did that come from?
A license plate says it's from the federal government.
Attention urban poor. The Federal Health Department, in conjunction with the Center for Minority Control, is here today with complimentary flu shots. Complimentary means free.
Free needles? God is good.
Hey, whoa. What the hell, Hop, are you people doing? Have you forgotten all your conspiracy learnings? Listen, the government uses projects to test all kinds of poisons. Syphilis, crack, the McChitlins.
Those chitlins made me mix sick.
Now you see what I'm talking about.
Hold on, everybody. This is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And we, the people. I'm sure there's nothing to fear.
Thank you, Mrs. Stubbs.
How do you know my name?
Because we're your friend. Now come on over here and drop your pants.
No, Muriel, it's a trick.
It's just a flu shot. Don't listen to that fool.
Aha! Flu, F-L-U. Fool, F-U-L. Coincidence? I don't think so. Come on, people. Let's tell them they can take their flu shots and shove them up their Arsenio's.
Yeah, just leave me my Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, and Social Security, and I'll be fine with no help from nobody.
Unalterable opposition of the Roman Catholic Church. That crusade kept Mrs. Sanger away from her children for long periods. It helped to break up her first marriage, and she suffered constant, harrowing social abuse. Mrs. Sanger, in view of all of that, let me ask you this first of all. Why did you do it? I realize that you had an intellectual conviction that birth control was a boon to mankind, but I'm sure that others have that conviction too. And so what I'd like to know is this. What events, what emotions in your life made Margaret Sanger a crusader for birth control?
Well, Mr. Wallace, it's hard to say that any one thing has made one do this or that. I think from the very beginning, I came with a large family. My mother died young, 11 children. That made an impression on me as a child. I was a trained nurse, went among the people. I saw women who asked to have some means whereby they wouldn't have to have another pregnancy too early after the last child, the last abortion, which many of them had. So there's a number of things that are one after the other that really made you feel that you had to do something.
There are some other possible reasons that suggest themselves on reading your biography by Lawrence later. Your mother, as you say, died prematurely after bearing 11 children. She was born a Catholic, was she not?
She was born a Catholic, yes.
And
in Ireland.
Your father was a sort of a village atheist who clashed with church authorities, and because of his atheism, his earnings dwindled under community pressure. You and your brothers and sisters were known as, quote,
this investigation of Planned Parenthood,
end quote. Could it be then that in part at least you were driven,
apologies about that, family, apologies about that,
toward the church because
yes.
And
in Ireland.
Your father was a sort of a village atheist who clashed with church authorities, and because of his atheism, his earnings dwindled under community pressure. You and your brothers and sisters were known as, quote, children of the devil, end quote. Could it be then that in part at least you were driven emotionally toward the birth control movement because of antagonism toward the church, because that was a way to fight the church?
No, I don't think I had anything of the kind in mind. I was what I would call a born humanitarian. I don't like to see people suffer. I don't like to see cruelty, even to this day. And in nursing, you see a great deal of cruelty and unnecessary suffering. At that time, there was no opposition as far as the church was concerned, any church. It was mainly the law, the federal law and state laws that one had to think of. The church was not in my mind at all.
Well, in going after your mother,
there was no opposition from the church. Okay. This lady's crazy.
Motive then. And I will press you just a little bit more about that and then get to the specifics of this evening. But in your motive, in the movement, is it possible that the movement itself, the feeling of wanting to do anything that you felt was important, that perhaps that moved you a good deal? Because the fact remains that you led a movement against overwhelming pressures that stemmed back for centuries, and in doing so, according to your autobiography, you even left your first husband. And you wrote this to a friend, Mrs. Sanger. You said, "Where is the man to give me what the movement gives in joy and interest and freedom?" Now, what was this joy, this freedom that you craved?
Well, I don't remember that letter, who it was written, but I think that it was not a question of marriage at all. There was a certain satisfaction in doing something that was going to alleviate the sufferings of women in particular, and I was quite a feminist at the time.
Obviously.
And yes, and I naturally didn't want to see women take all the suffering of childbearing and of pregnancies. So it was a pleasure in a sense. I think that you were striking at an archaic law, which it was. It's put on the statute books by Anthony Comstock some years ago, and no one had stood up against it. No one had tried to change the laws. And at that time, not even a doctor had a right to use the United States mails and common carriers for books, for learning, for anything that he had to do with this question. It was considered obscene. The whole question was considered obscene.
Mrs. Sanger, you have helped to spread the birth control movement not only here in the United States, but in Europe and the Orient as well. Why? Why is birth control of such vital importance internationally? Is it just to save women suffering? Is that the only reason in your mind?
Well, not entirely. The population question is a great concern today, and the rate at which the births come in to we're saving them now. At one time, when children died, they didn't have the food. Today, our population all over the world is getting certainly better consideration and better conditions than they had at the time that I was there. I went to every country because I was invited. And I didn't go into the country myself. I was invited to go to Japan and to speak there, to have 8 lectures on the question of birth control and peace.
Well, do you believe that birth control is essential if we want to keep millions of people across the world from starving? Is that your thesis?
Say it again.
Do you feel that birth control is essential to keep millions of people across the world from starving?
Well, I think that birth control, if you keep your population more or less static,
don't start it now,
pick up your resources, certainly you'll prevent their starving.
Well, what's more important, birth control or picking up the resources?
Well, picking up the resources, there's just a limit to that, too. There's just so much. Take Japan. And she cannot feed. They've had the best experts come there when MacArthur was there. And the best experts say that they have 20 million more people than they can feed. She's got to be fed outside in some way. She's got to have that kind of help if she's going to keep from fighting.
But certainly around the world there is potential agricultural land that is not being properly used now. Just this past year, on May 21st, the New York Times summarized an important study of the world's food resources made by Professor James Bonner of the California Institute of Technology. Professor Bonner says the world is not using 1 billion acres of potential agricultural land, and he adds that if this land were used and present agricultural land were improved, the entire world could be fed adequately, even if the population increased by 1/3 in the next 50 years.
Oh, Mr. Wallace, you hear so many. Oh, Mr. Wallace, you hear so many fantastic things of what can happen, what may happen. This and that, I've heard it for the last 30 years, at any rate, of what could be done, but it's never done. And the thing is, what is it now? What have we got today? A very distinguished woman spoke to me about Arizona, and she said, I wish you wouldn't talk about population. She said, all the population of the United States could be put in one state. And I said, what state? She said, Arizona. I said, did you ever hear of caliche? She didn't know that I was talking about a delicatessen or what. I said, well, caliche is harder than any rock, and it is about 3 inches below the ground, where it looks beautiful. It looks as if you could have food. It looks as if you could have corn or wheat or cotton. But as a better
lady, what the hell are you talking about? She made a very clear statement to you. Why are you talking about we need to control the population when there's tons of space in this country, and anybody who's traveled any time across the actual land of this country will see how open and vast and tons of amounts of free unused space there is. So what are you talking about? She made a very clear statement to you. You can just put the entire population of this country in Arizona. And this was back then. So I would imagine now it may not just be Arizona, but like the long and short of it is there's plenty of space, and there's not even enough people to fill up all the space there actually is. So what are we talking? Why do we need to remove so many people? Go ahead.
In fact, you have to dynamite caliche out of the ground in order to have a little shrub, have even a little grass or a few flowers. So many problems that when it comes to that. And
what the hell is she talking about?
I never heard of anyone that would agree with that we could have another in the world.
Another third. Well, you say that originally the opposition was in all law and you had to fight against that. Today, your opposition stems mainly from where? From what source?
Well, I think that the opposition is mainly from the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church.
Of the church. Well, now
Hierarchy.
of the hierarchy of the church. You feel that the parishioners themselves, the lay people in the church, are not against birth control?
I feel they come to all of our clinics just the same as the non-Catholics do. Exactly the same.
Well, let's look at the official Catholic position, opposition to birth control. I read now from a church publication called The Question Box. In forbidding birth control, it says the following. It says, the immediate purpose and primary end of marriage is the begetting of children. When the marital relation is so used as to render the fulfillment of its purposes impossible, that is by birth control, it is used unethically and unnaturally. Now, what's wrong with that position?
Well, it's very wrong. It's not normal. It's not, it has the wrong attitude toward marriage, toward love, toward the relationships between men and women.
Well, the natural law, they say, is that, first of all, the primary function of sex in marriage is to beget children.
Well,
do you disagree with that?
I disagree with it 100%.
Your feeling is what, then?
My feeling is love and the attraction between men and women. In many cases, the very finest relationship has nothing to do with bearing a child. It's secondary. Many, many times we know that. You see your birth rate, you talk to people who have very happy marriages and they're not having babies every year. Yes, I think that's a celibate attitude. Surely.
A celibate attitude, but you agree that Catholicism, according to the tenets of Catholicism, they rule that birth control violates not only the church's position, it isn't the church's position, but they say that it violates a natural law, as I have just explained. Therefore, birth control is a sin, no matter who practices it. Now, the violation of the natural law, according, you certainly can take no issue with the natural law as the hierarchy of the Catholic Church regards it.
Well, I certainly do take issue with it. I think it's untrue, and I think it's unnatural.
Well, let me ask you...
Everything bears it out that it's an unnatural attitude to take. And how do they know? I mean, after all, they're celibates. They don't know love. They don't know marriage. They know nothing about bringing up children or any of the marriage problems of life. And yet they speak to people as if they were God.
Let me ask you this question. Suppose a healthy, a well-to-do couple decide for some reason never to have children.
Fair use.
Use birth control all their lives.
Fair use.
Say that your methods are being misused, Mrs. Sanger.
Now, if they were intelligent people and they had some reason for thinking of children as a responsibility, or some disease that they might have that they wouldn't like to pass on to a child, and I think it would be a very unselfish attitude for them to take if there is a disease.
No, I say a healthy, well-to-do couple. A couple that just doesn't want children, and for that...
Very well, do she, y'all? He said a healthy, well-to-do couple. What would be their reason for not doing it? Oh, well, if they have diseases they don't want to pass on, and this and that, and he said no. I said a healthy, well-to-do couple. What would be their reason? Oh, they're just going to use it as birth control. They're just going to use it as retroactive birth control when they don't have to because they're healthy and well-to-do, as so many people do now. She heard what he said.
Say that your methods are being misused, Mrs. Sanger.
Now, if they're intelligent people...
Her methods are being misused.
Responsibility?
People are using it as retroactive birth control.
I ask you this question. Suppose a healthy, a well-to-do couple decide for some reason never to have children, use birth control all their lives. Would you say that your methods are being misused, Mrs. Sanger?
Now, if they were intelligent people and they had some reason for thinking of children as a responsibility, or some disease that they might have that they wouldn't like to pass on to a child, and I think it would be a very unselfish attitude for them to take if there is a disease.
No, I say a healthy, well-to-do couple. A couple that just doesn't want children, and for that reason they use birth control all the way. Well, do you think that that is a misuse of your methods?
I don't think it's a misuse. I think if they're intelligent adults, they must know what they want. They must manage their lives themselves. And certainly there's nothing birth control than there is in other things that you might deny yourself.
I asked you your motives a little while ago at the beginning of the program, your motives in working for birth control as hard as you have for as many years as you have. You reject the principal Catholic argument against birth control as being totally invalid. What do you think is the reason, the motive of the Church in forbidding birth control?
You'd have to ask a Catholic that. I couldn't say what their motive is.
Well, you couldn't say officially what their motive is, but you certainly must have an opinion about it, Mrs. Sanger.
Well, I don't have much to do with the hierarchy. And I know that the people that come to our organization and want to have the same methods, or whatever it is that one can have to prevent a pregnancy, that those women will say to us, we ask their religion very often, and they say, I am a Catholic, I was raised in the Catholic Church, and my church is wrong on this. This is the one thing. I will never be anything else, but my church is wrong on this one thing. And that is said over and over and over again. So what the motive is?
But you won't hazard a guess.
I don't care to. Thank you.
May I ask you why? Now, I know that in private and actually in public discussions, I think, prior to this time, you have been willing to state your understanding of what the motives of the Church are, and now you would rather remain silent. May I ask you why?
Well, simply because I don't think that the Church has changed in its attitude. Some of the hierarchy have changed their attitude. You can't say the same thing that you might have said a year ago or 2 years ago as to your belief or as to your opinion. Mm-hmm. And
have you heard it said that the reason that the Church is against birth control is because they want more Catholics?
I've read it.
Do you believe it?
Well, if you read their papers, where they point out Boston, that's what has happened in Boston and Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. They have simply outbred the Protestants, and they in Boston and Massachusetts, they have control. I've read that in their own papers.
I see. Of course, the Church's answer, and I read now from a pamphlet published by the Redemptorist Fathers in Missouri, says as follows. It says that point of view about wanting more Catholics is nonsense. Quote, the Catholic Church does not command Catholic husbands and wives to have even one child. The Church considers it more than normally meritorious for them to have no children if they mutually and perpetually give up the use of the marriage rite for the love of God.
All right. I don't quote what they do. So I think that the question in my mind is that they do and order their own people to do as they wish. But I object to their having the same rules for people who are not the same religion.
Well, they believe, you see, that it is a natural law, not a Catholic law, but a natural law, and therefore a sin not just for Catholics, but a sin for all peoples. And I think that there are other religious groups, the very, very Orthodox Jews feel the same way about birth control. Let's look at another argument against birth control, Mrs. Sanger, published in Red Book magazine in March of 1956. It says birth control is a devastating social force which tends to weaken the moral fiber of the community. Immunity from parenthood encourages promiscuity.
Immunity from parenthood encourages promiscuity.
Have you heard it said that the reason that the Church is against birth control is because they want more Catholics?
I've read it.
Do you believe it?
Well, if you read their papers, where they point out Boston, that's what has happened in Boston and Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. They have simply outbred the Protestants, and they in Boston and Massachusetts, they have control. I've read that in their own papers.
I see. Of course, the Church's answer, and I read now from a pamphlet published by the Redemptorist Fathers in Missouri, says as follows. It says that point of view about wanting more Catholics is nonsense. Quote, the Catholic Church does not command Catholic husbands and wives to have even one child. The Church considers it more than normally meritorious for them to have no children if they mutually and perpetually give up the use of the marriage rite for the love of God.
Right, that alludes to the concept of them making themselves eunuchs, as it spoke about. Hold up, let me pull it up. Pull it up for you. And as always, gang, support the brand, support the brand. You are getting to hear directly from the horse's mouth. Margaret Sanger's evil herself. Support the movement, gang. Support the movement. And I thank you and God bless you for every single donation you send my way. Much appreciated. But gang, Matthew chapter 19 and verse 12. Let me pull this up real quick. You can't get away from this book. So Matthew chapter 19. I'm going to start at So essentially it was a conversation between Jesus and his disciples, and they were arguing back and forth about marriage. I'm gonna read the whole thing because I think it's actually a very interesting conversation. So divorce. When Jesus had finished saying these things, he left Galilee and went into the region of Judea to the other side of the Jordan. Large crowds followed him, and he healed them there. Some Pharisees came to him to test him. They asked, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason?" Jesus wasn't playing with the Pharisees. He ain't like them. Haven't you read? You know, Jesus was very stout, man. He was very, Haven't you read? He replied, that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female and said, for this reason will a man leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. That's his answer when it comes to divorce. What God has joined together, let no one separate. Woo! Why then, they asked, did Moses command that a man give his wife a certificate of divorce and send her away? Jesus was like, did you not hear what I said? Jesus, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because your hearts were hard. But it was not this way from the beginning. Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because your heart was hard. Man, but it was not this way from the beginning. I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, and marries another woman, commits adultery. The disciple said to him, if this is the situation between husband and wife, it's better not to marry. Jesus replied, not everyone can accept this word, but only those whom it has been given. Let he who hath ears hear. For there are eunuchs who were born that way, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by others, and there are those who choose to live like eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. The one who can accept this should accept it. The one who can do marriage should do marriage. But those who make themselves eunuchs for the sake of the church, so be it. So the church's reply to Margaret Sanger is, sure, if they want to give up having children, which is what you're supposed to do, be fruitful and multiply, if they are going to make themselves eunuchs for the church, they're going to give up the right to have children, sure. Are they giving themselves to God then? Like, are they done with all of that? Done with all the worldly stuff? Oh no, you just want to play games. You just want to play games. You just want to play games. Man, let's go back.
I don't quote what they do. So in Boston and Massachusetts, they have control. I've read that in their own papers.
I see. Of course, the church's answer, and I read now from a pamphlet published by the Redemptorist Fathers in Missouri, says as follows. It says that point of view about wanting more Catholics is nonsense. Quote, the Catholic Church does not command Catholic husbands and wives to have even one child. The Church considers it more than normally meritorious for them to have no children if they mutually and perpetually give up the use of the marriage rite for the love of God.
All right.
If they give up the marriage rite, you know what that means? The hankety, spankety, 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 spank, spank, spank. If they give that up to be eunuchs for God, for the kingdom, then yeah, sure. All right, well, that's shut up. Evil. Damn.
What they do, so I think that the question in my mind is that they do and order their own people to do as they wish. But I object to their having the same rules for people who are not the same religion.
Well, they believe, you see, that it is a natural law, not a Catholic law, but a natural law.
It is a natural law, not a Catholic law, man. Man. 1 and 1 makes 3, man. It's a natural law. Let's get it on. Let's get it on. 9 months later. It's a natural law. Nothing to do with the church, ma'am.
And therefore a sin not just for Catholics, but a sin for all peoples. And I think that there are other religious groups, the very, very Orthodox Jews feel the same way about birth control. Let's look at another argument against birth control, Mrs. Sanger, published in Red Book magazine in March of 1956. It says birth control is a devastating social force which tends to weaken the moral fiber of the community. Immunity from parenthood encourages promiscuity, particularly when unmarried persons can so easily avail themselves of the devices. Do you doubt that?
I doubt it.
You do?
Certainly.
Then let me read from a news story in the Philadelphia Daily News on June 10th, 1942. The story quotes you as urging the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps to give its members, quote, preventive measures against pregnancy, end quote. And you add, quote, abortion and illegitimacy are bound to result if the government doesn't recognize human nature, end quote. In other words, you were not advocating Christian morality, but rather ways for single women to avoid bearing illegitimate children.
So this is interesting because she says that if the Catholic Church ignores human nature, they are being, almost Neanderthalic and not recognizing what happens when two people come together. But I think the fathers who wrote her the letter so eloquently in this interview very clearly stated, no, man, this ain't got nothing to do with the church. This is natural law. When the pankety-ankety goes to spankety-spankety, it just happens that way. Forgive my vulgarity, people. Forgive my vulgarity. I'm a work in progress. I am a work in progress, but I'm always thankful to the Most High for all the blessings, to you and your family, and every single day, all the blessings that pour down on me and my family. Hallelujah. But I am a work in progress, so forgive me, gang. But when that ankety goes bankety bangety, that's a natural law. Seems like you're trying to usurp and avoid and get around natural law, man. Not them.
Where was this taken from?
Philadelphia Daily News, June 10, 1940.
Don't worry about where the article came from. Oh, you trying to say, well, the article. I hate when people do that. Oh, the article ain't valid because of the source. If you don't shut your.
For the love of God.
All right. I don't quote what they do. So I think that the question in my mind is that they do and order their own people to do as they wish. But I object to their having the same rules for people who are not the same religion.
Well, they believe, you see, that it is a natural law, not a Catholic law, but a natural law, and therefore a sin not just for Catholics, but a sin for all peoples. And I think that there are other religious groups, the very, very Orthodox Jews feel the same way about birth control. Let's look at another argument against birth control, Mrs. Sanger, published in Red Book magazine in March of 1956. It says birth control is a devastating social force which tends to weaken the moral fiber of the community. Immunity from
a devastating social force which weakens the moral fiber. It lowers the morality of a community. Let's keep going.
Parenthood encourages promiscuity. But
has it encouraged promiscuity? No, of course not. Never. How dare you make such a statement? You are wrong.
Particularly when unmarried persons can so easily avail themselves of the devices. Do you doubt that?
I doubt it.
I doubt it too. Let's keep going.
You do?
Certainly.
Then let me read from a news story in the Philadelphia Daily News on June 10th, 1942. The story quotes you as urging the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps to give its members, quote, preventive measures against pregnancy, end quote. And you add, quote, abortion and illegitimacy are bound to result if the government doesn't recognize human nature, end quote. In other words, you were not advocating Christian morality, but rather ways for single women to avoid bearing illegitimate children.
Where was this taken from?
Philadelphia Daily News, June 10.
Oh, she trying to front like she ain't say that. Nasty work. Nasty work, lady.
1942, direct quote from Margaret Sanger.
I doubt it. I don't believe I ever made such a remark.
Well,
she a pimp, bro. She's standing 10 toes down.
In the same vein, in your autobiography, which you cannot disavow, you wrote the following about sexologist Havelock Ellis. You said he's been able to clarify the question of sex and free it from the smudginess connected with it from the beginning of Christianity.
My God.
Now, what do you mean by the smudginess connected with sex, and why do you blame it on Christianity?
Well, there's many reasons, of course, to say we have more records of it from the dawn of Christianity. And I think I was speaking of Havelock Ellis as having clarified the question of homosexuals, making the thing not exactly a perverted thing, but a thing that a person is born with, different kinds of eyes, different kinds of structure, and so forth. That he didn't make all homosexuals perverts. And I felt that he helped clarify that. I felt that he helped clarify that to the medical profession and to the scientists of the world, as perhaps one of the first ones to do that. That was one of the things that I meant in that.
Mrs. Sanger, do you disagree that Catholics, or do you feel that Catholics should not have a right to have a say when a city administration contemplates spending their tax dollars on birth control or the dissemination of birth control information, something that Catholics believe is sinful?
If they have a right to say what they...
Do you feel that they don't have a right to have a say when a city administration contemplates spending their dollars, tax dollars, on birth control? For instance, here in New York, Catholics comprise about 45% of our population. They're the largest single group. Well, don't you think they should have the democratic right to lobby against having their money spent, their tax money spent, for something that they consider evil?
Well, I suppose they have a right. They certainly do it. But so have the others. They're only 45% of the population. That is not the majority.
But they have a right to get up and...
Certainly. I'd have no objection to having them say that, but I think we should have the same right. I say we, I mean non-Catholics.
Well,
Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
Disagree that Catholics, or do you feel that Catholics should not have a right to have a say when a city administration contemplates spending their tax dollars on birth control or the dissemination of birth control information, something that Catholics believe is sinful?
If they have a right to say what they...
Do you feel that they don't have a right to have a say when a city administration contemplates spending their dollars, tax dollars, on birth control? For instance, here in New York, Catholics comprise about 45% of our population. They're the largest single group. Well, don't you think they should have the democratic right to lobby against having their money spent, their tax money spent, for something that they consider evil?
Well, I suppose they have a right. They certainly do it. But so have the others. They're only 45% of the population. That is not the majority.
But they have a right to get up and...
Certainly. I'd have no objection to their having them say that, but I think we should have the same right. I say we, I mean non-Catholics.
Well, of course, this is a little bit at variance with something that you told our reporter earlier this week. You said earlier this week, it's not only wrong, it should be made illegal for any religious group to prohibit dissemination of birth control, even among its own members. In other words, you would like to see the government legislate religious beliefs in a certain sense.
Where these strange things come to... that I said them is what I should like to know. Right? They certainly do it. But so have the others. They're only 45% of the population. That is not the majority.
But they have a right to get up and...
Certainly. I'd have no objection to their having them say that, but I think we should have the same right. I say we, I mean non-Catholics.
Well, of course, this is a little bit at variance with something that you told our reporter earlier this week. You said earlier this week, it's not only wrong, it should be made illegal for any religious group to prohibit dissemination of birth control, even among its own members.
Where these strange things come to... that I said them is what I should like to know when.
Well, now, you know that my reporter spent a good...
Hail Mary, full of grace. She don't know she's dealing with Chris Wallace. Sorry, I was muted there for a second. Relax and take notes. She's dealing with Chris Wallace, man. You know how big this is? This goes out to you, and you, and you. Biggie, boom, 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 boom. Died on March 9th. She need to relax and take notes while he takes jokes. Biggie's mayor, the rap slayer, the bunker layer. Say your prayers. Hail Mary, full of grace. You're dead wrong, Margaret.
Deal of time with you. He's very accurate young man.
Yes.
And this is a specific...
She said, so am I. Shut your mouth. All right. I said I ain't safe. Can't.
Quote.
Well, I don't think I said it quite that way.
What are your religious beliefs?
Oh, now she didn't say it quite that way. Shut up!
Mrs. Sanger, do you believe in a God in the sense of a divine being who rewards or punishes people after death?
Well, I have a different attitude about...
Oh, you have a different attitude about God.
The divine. I feel that we have divinity within us.
Of course, we have divinity within us. We are all gods, children of the Most High. Let me get that real quick. Of course, let's go. Ye are gods, children of the Most High God. But you will die as men. She trying to play? Like, we don't agree with that? Of course we agree with that. I have said, ye are gods, and all children, and all of you are children of the Most High. But ye shall die like men and fall like one of the princes. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for thou shalt inherit all nations. Can I get a God? Amen.
The more we express the good part of our lives, the more the divine within us expresses itself. I suppose I would call myself Episcopalian by religion. And there's many other. If you've traveled around the world, you get quite a bit of the feeling of all religions have so much alike in the divine part of our own being. And I suppose you just couldn't put that in a book, or you couldn't put it into a phrase or a sentence.
Do you believe in sin? When I say believe, I don't mean believe in committing sin. Do you believe there is such a thing as sin?
Well, I think the greatest sin in the world is bringing children into the world that have disease from their parents, that have...
She said what she said, and it was a sentence stop right there. She said, I believe the biggest sin in the world is to bring children into it. My God.
I don't think I said it quite that way.
What are your religious beliefs, Mrs. Sanger? Do you believe in a God in the sense of a divine being who rewards or punishes people after death?
Well, I have a different attitude about the divine. I feel that we have divinity within us. And the more we express the good part of our lives, the more the divine within us expresses itself.
Psalm 82.
I suppose I would call myself Episcopalian by religion.
Okay.
And there's many other. If you've traveled around the world, you get quite a bit of the feeling of all religions have so much alike in the divine part of our own being. And I suppose you just couldn't put that in a book, or you couldn't put it into a phrase or a sentence.
Do you believe in sin? When I say believe, I don't mean believe in committing sin. Do you believe there is such a thing as sin?
Well, I think the greatest sin in the world is bringing children into the world that have disease from their parents, that have no chance in the world to be a human being, practically, delinquents, prisoners. So,
I've spent a good deal of time with you. He's a very accurate young man.
Yes.
And this is a specific quote.
Well, I don't think I said it quite that way.
What are your religious beliefs, Mrs. Sanger? Do you believe in a God in the sense of a divine being who rewards or punishes people after death?
Well, I have a different attitude about the divine. I feel that we have divinity within us. And the more we express the good part of our lives, the more the divine within us expresses itself. I suppose I would call myself Episcopalian by religion. And there's many other. If you've traveled around the world, you get quite a bit of the feeling of all religions have so much alike in the divine part of our own being. And I suppose you just couldn't put that in a book, or you couldn't put it into a phrase or a sentence.
Do you believe in sin? When I say believe, I don't mean believe in committing sin. Do you believe there is such a thing as sin?
Well, I think the greatest sin in the world is bringing children into the world that have disease from their parents, that have no chance in the world to be a human being, practically, delinquents, prisoners, all sorts of things, just marked when they're born. That, to me, is the greatest sin that people can commit.
But sin in the ordinary sense that we regard it, do you believe or do you not believe?
Well, what would they be?
Do you believe that infidelity is a sin?
Well, I'm not going to specify what I think is sin. I've stated what I think is the worst sin.
Yes, but then you asked me to say what, and I said what, and you refused to answer me?
Yes, I don't know about infidelity. It has so many personalities to it, and what...
I don't know if infidelity is a sin. It has so many complexities to it. First Corinthians 6:9. Do you or do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived. Neither the sexually immoral, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor men who practice homosexuality. Do not be deceived, family.
Belief is, you can't, I couldn't. Delinquents, prisoners, all sorts of things just marked when they're born. That to me is the greatest sin that people can commit.
But sin in the ordinary sense that we regard it, do you believe or do you not believe?
Well, what would they be?
Do you
Now, one thing I will give her credit for, it is truly, you are seen as an unbeliever if you do not take care of the children of your own house. So she is right in that regard. But her means as to which to remove that problem. Ma'am.
believe that infidelity is a sin?
Well, I'm not going to specify what I think is sin. I've stated what I think is the worst sin.
Yes, but then you asked me to say what, and I said what, and you refused to answer me?
Yes, I don't know about infidelity. It has so many personalities to it, and what a person's own belief is. You can't, I couldn't generalize any of those things as being sin.
Murder is a sin.
Well, I naturally think murder is a sin or not. It's a terrible act.
I think a murderer is a sin. Let me take you to this clinic. Do not be deceived.
In just a moment, Mrs. Sanger, I'd like to ask you about another social problem here in the United States, divorce. Nearly 400,000 couples get divorced in this country each year. And I'd like to get your views on the cause and possible prevention of this problem. We'll get Mrs. Sanger's answer to that question.
And it's so crazy that he brought that up, because anybody, please check out, if you haven't already, my Vanishing Black Family series. Check out the Vanishing Black Family series. Check out all the amazing playlists that we putting together. And thank you so much for doing so. And make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Like, share, subscribe to the channel. Tell a friend and tell a friend. Share your favorite episodes on all your social medias. Let people know. Get people involved in the conversation, man. We're going to keep it going. But yeah, in the Vanishing Black Family series that I did, once the young lady had an abortion, her and the man she already had one child with no longer stayed together. It's almost as if now she was already saying she didn't want to be married, but now maybe she doesn't even feel she needs a man.
In just 60 seconds.
One loose box.
Control connects. Have you...
The pack or crush-proof box, probably the best natural smoke you ever tasted. Now then, Mrs. Sanger, there are nearly 400,000 divorces or annulments in America each year. What, and this is hard to do in the short time, of course, that we have, what would you recommend to cut down our divorce rate?
Well, as a great many of our clinics are including in the work that they do in birth control clinics, having marriage counseling. So when the woman or the man come and complain of their marriage on the skids, we invite them to come and have special talks with some of our psychiatrists or others who are making a study of that all over the country, where we have about 500 clinics. They almost all include marriage counseling and marriage erection.
May I ask you this? Could it be that women...
But what is the percentage of people who actually go to Planned Parenthood for marriage counseling? You know what? I think I'm gonna look that up.
In the United States have become too independent that they've followed the lead of women like Margaret Sanger by neglecting family life for a career. Let me quote from your biography describing your second marriage to Noah Slee. Quote, in New York, Mrs. Sanger maintained every clause of their compact of independence. They had separate apartments, they telephoned each other for dinner or theater engagements, or passed notes back and forth. Would you call this a sound formula for marriage, Mrs. Sanger?
Different people, yes. It certainly was for me and for my husband. We had a very happy marriage consulting. He had different friends than I had. And I don't believe in forcing, after all, we were two adults, and forcing your friends on another person who may have an entirely different outlook. It worked out very well.
I know that it did. You have two sons. One final question. You have two sons. How many children have they?
Would you like to see them?
I would indeed.
As well as...
How many children? That's 6 in this family?
5 boys and a girl in that family.
And in the other family?
2 girls.
2 girls.
So she having 800 million children while she's telling you to have 0. Pay attention to that, family. Do not be deceived. I'm looking, and it looks like they don't offer those services anymore. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate.
Miss Sanger, I thank you so much for taking time out and coming and talking to us here this
I don't.
And Mr. Wells, I've never smoked, but I'm going to begin to take up smoking and use Philip Morris as the cigarette for me to take.
Well, I thank you very much, Mrs. Sanger.
Indeed.
In the eyes of some, Margaret Sanger has been a heroine. In the eyes of others, she's been a destructive force. The purpose of this interview has been not, of course, to try to resolve this issue, but to open it to a little sensible discussion. This was done with the feeling that all of us, regardless of our beliefs, can do nothing but profit from a free exchange of ideas.
I mean, it says that they help with relationships, short term. I guess that's supposed to be marriage, family issues. I really want to know what the percentages of people that go in there for that, because 15 minutes to an hour. Oh, listen, man, I would hope that they give people some of these services because they're sorely needed. People in any of these states of life are making decisions very often in emotionally charged states of mind. They are frantic, they're kinetic, they're frenetic. They're not thinking calmly and rationally. They're not in a place of serenity. They're not even killed. They don't got their zen up. You know, they not zen the F out like Big Sean. So they need people who can calm them, give them a place of ease and comfort, a sanctuary where they can get their thoughts clear before they make life-altering decisions. And if y'all are just pushing, and being salespeople, that's very unfortunate, because that's not what I imagine people come to y'all for in those moments of their life where things are going crazy. But we're going to leave it right there for now, gang. I hope you enjoyed that blast from the past and that interview with Margaret Sanger. We're going to continue on with this series, the curious case of the D.N.C. and the PPP, and the curious case of the D.N.C. and the double P. Support, gang. Give a little, give a lot, give $1, give 10,000, give $10,000. his ghetto point of view, $ his ghetto point of view, $ his ghetto point of view, and you know where to tap in, his ghetto point of view at gmail.com. Love to the tribe, love to the tribe. We out of here.
Thank you for coming. I'll see you in hell.